and we like to call him Tom. Tom is a dear friend and a mentor. And you know what? With this summit, he's been having our back, right, Veronica? You
Yes.
know, Thomas is the co-founder of Global Community for Health, and he's so just humbly said, Teresa, whatever you need, let me know. And also his co-founder, Mr. Chin Min Kai, should be also on board with us today. I did send him a VIP ticket. So thank you also, Min Kai, if I can't locate you, you know, in the sea of people here. Tom, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a bit more because I think it's better you do the talking than me. And, you know, thank you so much. I couldn't say it enough. You know that and how much I love you and how grateful I am for you being my mentor, my friend, and being our keynote speaker for the day. Thank you.
Oh, you're too kind. And can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly well.
Oh, well, Veronica first and Teresa, thank you so much for including me in this prestigious summit. You know how passionate I am. I've only done one thing for 40 years, and that's work with kids and mental well-being and health. And a special thanks to Karuna and Nanny. That was absolutely beautiful. We know how important music is to the mental well-being of children and that education process. Actually, music has one of the deepest science over 50 years validating the importance that music plays in the well-being of kids. So inspirational start, and I couldn't be more excited to hear all the speakers. And you know how important partnerships is. It's what the Global Foundation is about partnerships and sharing these experience and how we kind of raise these communities as a collaborative effort. So let me get started because I know we're running a little bit behind.
That's okay. We're right on time, Tom. It's perfect.
Okay, well, again, thank you. And I'm excited to be here. And I'm going to try to go through these slides as fast as I can and get my timer started so I don't run over.
All good.
But, you know, we have serious problems today, and they name what we call sustainable solutions. And that's a big factor that the foundation kind of looks at is sustainability as we're looking at solutions, especially as it pertains to kids and well-being. You know, we all know the aspects of suicide and mental well-being. We know it's one of the second leading causes of death today. You know, one of the biggest things that we're really up against is funding. And with your speakers today, we're going to see so many wonderful programs, but governments, especially here in the United States, but governments all over the world lack really the funding to seriously implement the mental well-being programs that our kids and our teachers need to successfully, you know, groom a kid for the future. You know, we know that 1 in 6 people in the European countries today have a mental health problem. And more importantly, as we set up, and this is one of the things that we really work on, is the transparency. There are a lot of organizations and foundations out there, but with this comes a lot of fraud. So we have to make sure as we building these structures or these platforms that the transparency and where the denomination of dollars are going to can be tracked and recorded. And of course, we talk a lot just about general health or health in general. And we know, Teresa, you and I have spoken often on this, that children, whether it's diet, lack of exercise, these play critical roles into the mental well-being of children. So these are my current positions today. These are my responsibilities. The CEO of HOPSports, which has been around for about 25 years. The focus is really designing technology and integrating programs regarding education, K through 12, primary education to the 12th grade for schools and community centers all over the world. Along with Dr. Min Kai Chin, we founded the Global Community Health Foundation, which was really about bringing a team of experts together to really dive in deep on what credible programs were out there, how we could set up forums, how we could publish the research out there, and how we could collaborate with universities, government institutions all over the world. I also sit on as an advisor to the UN Global Sustainability Index Institute, which is extremely important today because for the first time, we're really holding communities and corporations and soon to be schools accountable for humanitarian and the well-being efforts that they either teach or they engage with their community. And that is a big change in direction of how we're kind of looking at the end of your high school career or your education. It's not just about your standardized test scores, but that there's an index for how you are as a human being. And then I also sit as an advisor on the Global Mental Wellness Foundation, and you'll hear David Traub a little bit later talk a little bit more about that. So these are going to be my presentation topics today. I'm going to talk a little bit. They've asked me to talk about surviving COVID. Unfortunately, I was critically cared with by COVID. I spent 23 days in intensive care with COVID. I spent another 100 days on an oxygen machine. I hadn't been hospitalized since I was 14. I've been healthy. I had no pre-existing conditions. As a matter of fact, my wife got it at the same time and barely had a sniffle. So I'm going to show a short journey on my COVID experience, because one of the things that I did is I documented that experience even in the hospital. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on my journey for well-being for children. I'm going to talk a little bit about the foundation and what the Global Community Health Foundation is doing right now. And I'm going to really dive into how partnerships and community well-being are taking the lead in terms of former or future education. Because really the solution is what we call community-based well-being education. And what that means is that in a community or a city, and there are currently in the world 10,000 cities with 50,000 residents, how are these cities going to incorporate and collaborate as a unit to more effectively raise kids, in essence, as a more humanitarian, happy, engaged young child? So let's go over surviving COVID. I apologize if some of these slides are a little bit raw. It was hard for me to even get dressed. I struggled from day one, and this was day one in ICU. I couldn't believe that I had it. I thought I'd be out in a couple days, and fortunate, I was kind of counting on my health to just get me out. By day three, I knew I was in trouble. I was on a high level of oxygen. I could barely get up. I was just losing weight, and it was going to be a much longer process. But I started to become encouraged by all of the relationships and friendships I had all over the world. One of the things that the nurses were so kind to do is they set up a Zen wall for me, I called it. And my years of teaching yoga, breathing techniques, aerobic instructor, I really used a lot of that when my SpO2s would drop. And at times my SpO2s would drop into the 70s, even slightly turning over in bed. And it was extremely difficult for me. And it was just this constant struggle that became hourly of fighting for my breath like I was drowning. And I would look at this wall and get into deep breathing techniques that I could just slowly, within a couple minutes, try to get that SpO2 up to around 86, 88, so I could somewhat be comfortable. And then again, a slight turn would make it happen. You know, everything from I just observed and, you know, from blood clotting that happens. I just took pictures of, you know, injections all through the night, you know, just to keep from the antibiotics that I was taking to not have some form of a blood clot. I think just in my stomach at the end, I had 43. Now, again, I'm very sympathetic. There are so many more people that go through such more detailed cancer survivors, horrendous exercises. So I'm always cautious. And when I'm talking about my experience, to be humbled enough to know that so many people are fighting such more difficult battles than I did. This was a hard part, you know, and this is one of the things that made me realize about how difficult it is for so many families. So many areas restricted families from coming in and saying goodbye. And my grandkids and people around me could only come and talk to me through the window on the phone. And it just made me really experience that time that we were going through, that people couldn't honestly hug or say goodbye to individuals that were passing away due to this horrendous virus. I was very grateful. I took, I think in the end, over 42 doctors and nurses, strapped up to come in and take care of me. And I'm just so appreciative of the risk they took, knowing that, look, there's always a possibility of catching COVID, and the risk they took to come in and save my life. I show this one as a quick picture. This was just me 2 years. I'm 60 years old. I was 185 pounds when I went in, and I left at 155 pounds. Just the lungs and the great outpouring. COVID just took over my lungs, but I was so appreciative. Again, I think by day 16, 137 countries around the world had engaged in a prayer for me. And just the experiences and the people that I've met, it always reminds me that that chalice is half full for all of us. And let's see. And this is just a quick video of how difficult it was for me to even get to a chair. And again, I apologize, but I just felt it so important to share the whole experience that an individual goes through, and how difficult and how quick this virus just took away your physical ability. It's been 10 months and I'm still unable to get to 60% of my max VO2. And of course, on day 22, extremely blessed and grateful, and again, humbled by all the prayers and the experience, but just re-energized me on how important mental health is to recovery, to how we engage with others in our society today. So I'm just going to talk quickly about my journey in student well-being. As I said, I've done nothing else in my whole life but 35 years dedicated to working with kids around the world. I've been very blessed to visit over 500 communities around the world, from Zimbabwe to Turkey to up to Pakistan to Singapore, where everybody is, to Hong Kong, to China. And it's one thing that I deeply realize is we all can benefit from better well-being programs, but that we're all a unique community. And that was critical in terms of understanding. I built one of the first functional training centers in the world in 1987. I was lucky to work in the entertainment business. I was the trainer for Disney and Nickelodeon and a lot of the kids shows early on. So I had a very unique opportunity to kind of develop something that not a lot of individuals were looking at in 1987. And because I was working on unique shows like the American Gladiator and different aspects, it really introduced kind of functional movement. As a matter of fact, this was really one of the first functional training centers built in the United States in 1987. I had a 15-year collaboration with the Stuntman's Association, working with them, and I extremely enjoyed that. They'd always come to me and say, look, I got to fall down a hill, get hit by a bus, and I got to come up running. I always thought to be a great challenge. My first school district that I worked with was in 1992. This picture is kind of important to me because really my first job was working with kids with autism, and it really developed that first concept that whatever I was going to do down the road, every child needed to be included. And of course, even through the first video, which we created in 1999, which was really the first training, kind of functional training video sold for kids in the United States. I founded HOPSports in 2003. The first program we kind of worked with was driving internet technology, which was in 2004. Very few organizations could do that. As a matter of fact, our first partner was with TiVo. And if you didn't have a TiVo, you basically couldn't drive digital video. And that became really our first understanding that digital online education was going to be a powerful tool down the road. And then how we drive that. So here it is. This is kind of how it looked like when it's on the wall. This was driving concepts into India back in the day. Same thing. One of the things that we found is when we projected content or information on a screen where all kids were looking at it, two things kind of happened. Instead of each kid individually looking at a screen, we found that they were more cohesive as a group. It looked like it was more project-based learning, that they were more engaged, they collaborated more together. The second thing that we found is that they weren't really looking at each other to either make fun of them, to see if somebody was doing wrong. They were, as always, when a TV turns on, they were focused on the screen. So it a lot of inhibitions to let go and for kids to train at a higher intensity. And this was one of our first little schools, so we used a lot of different technology back in the day. This was the first program that President Obama awarded as a demonstration site for overall well-being in the United States. We became our own filming studio, and one of the things that we did is we understood that we needed to shoot content in a very unique way. And that means that we shot on a green screen because we never wanted the videos to get old. And by shooting on a green screen with no voices, it allowed us to manipulate that content by changing the backdrop, by changing the music, by changing the messaging, so that even though we filmed it once, it gave us thousands of combinations that we could use down the road. And here's an example where we had Roy the Lion, and these were mascots we brought in from the NFL. And one picture, he's in Detroit on the Ford Field. And the second one on the bottom, he is on the field at Shanghai Sport University. So again, it allowed us to creatively bring in more culture. And the more we could bring in various forms of culture and share that, the more opportunity we had for not only engaging kids, but having kids become more compassionate about other cultures around the world. And then one of our first big programs is with the Chicago Bulls and the NBA. And we built a center with Michael Jordan when his dad was murdered. And it was the first opportunity that we actually built a facility that brought in music, well-being, all kinds of different techniques to kind of look at more well-being than just a sports facility. At the very beginning, thank you to, again, Dr. Min Kai. He really stressed the importance of evidence-based and research. And that became really what the foundation became about, was validating and looking at evaluation tools and how important these evidence-based programs that you were providing were extremely researched and vetted and published in prestigious journals. So this was the first one we did in 2008 with 8,000 elementary school kids in North Carolina. And we not only looked at the impact that we were having on their health, but we looked at the economic impact that now well-being was having. And it was the first study done in the United States that said, look, if you invest in a child to the city, there is a financial economic return on that dollar. The program with the NFL, I've been invited to Capitol Hill several times to speak on Congress and to engage them. And then consumer electronics shows, we were the first organization invited to the first Digital Health Summit, which is now in a whole hotel by itself. But at this time, only 10 companies were invited to the first consumer electronics show, Digital Health, of how digital health was going to impact future generations. And then finally, in 2010, it really became important that our partnerships were really about mental well-being. And this was the first program with the Federal Bureau of Investigation that had been developing a program after Columbine and recognized school shootings and the impact mental health was having on violence, that they developed the ISPTC organization and looked at recognizing threats, understanding indicators, and responding to those threats. So we almost really focused on changing the word of bullying to really looking at it as managing threats. And that's when we came up with Brain Breaks that you see today. And that's kind of what we thrive on, is delivering short bouts of information today in all realms of well-being. It was announced first by Michelle Obama speaking to the governors in 2012. We really kind of took Brain Breaks to another level because we now wanted to be able to share this with the world and to incorporate a lot of different partnerships. And Dr. Min Kai Chin went to the National Institute of Education in Singapore and the National Institute in Hong Kong. And we realized that if we were going to validate the programs, we needed to create or set up our own evaluation tool. And that became published in the Journal of Applied Measurement. And what I mean by that is, if I ask you if you're happy, you might say, yeah, I'm happy. But if I ask you, how's your car? How's your wife? How's your kids? How's your job? Then I ask you how you're happy, maybe not so much. So how we structured collecting the data, asking the questionnaires was critically important to us. I also get to present at the World Economic Forum on education and well-being and how that is impacting the SDGs. I hope everybody's familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. It's the big agenda for the United Nations for 2030. And the SDG goals and how kids are pertaining to or measuring that are extremely important. Of course, we were awarded, Brain Breaks was awarded at the UN for our use of media for good social impact. So on our research, we've been working diligently for 6 years all around the world, starting in 2008 and continuing through looking at the impact we could have based on gender, based on BMI, based on the economic factor here, where you see that there is a cost return, which, you know, for most governments, that ROI is incredibly important. We did our research. We took that research and that platform and that evaluation tool, and we looked at kids in programs all over the world. This was a recent study published in the International Journal of Environmental and Public Health. This was another one in Malaysia, another one in South Africa. And I think in the last 5 years, we've published 22 studies. So this is the foundation. Dr. Min Kai and I, and again, we've been so blessed to bring together a team of scientific advisors from all over the world. And on the right side, second row down, is Teresa, who also sits on our advisory board. There's our future leaders. These are young guns representing 23 countries that are clearly the leaders in their country, that are really our boots on the ground and engaging programs and bringing to us best practices. Of course, just some pictures of us around the world. And again, some of the research and innovation, just in the next couple of years, we'll be hosting several conferences around the world, run by Dr. Min Kai Chin and the Foundation for Global Community Health. I'm going to talk a little bit now on partnerships and community well-being, because this is what I think is critically important for all of you that are bringing your program and messaging to community, schools, or families. These organizations play a very powerful role from not only finance, but the ability to engage with social media. Along with these global partners, the focus today is CSR. And for those of you that don't know, that's corporate social responsibility in kind of a broad term. And Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, and you can see that the strategy is you must understand the societal impact of your business as well as the broad structural trends. And BlackRock itself has $9 trillion in assets, and operates 70 offices in 30 countries. And Unilever said the same thing. We believe that to succeed requires the highest standards of corporate behavior towards our employees, consumers, and the societies and worlds in which we live. And that is really important because now through the UNGSII, we're measuring that and we're publishing that. And that journal is released every year at the World Economic Forum and releases a CSR index on the impact that that corporation is having on its community. And then we'll talk a little bit about school and community well-being. I always like this picture. Classrooms haven't changed, the 1800s to today. Everybody sits in a desk and we still think every child learns the same way. This is kind of our focus, is community-based learning and how we can bridge that gap and build that bigger bridge between the right and the left side of the brain. Because at the end of the day, the more those two hemispheres work together, the better opportunity we have that an individual is making a compassionate decision instead of a literal decision. So these are the three models that we use for well-being in school. The UN Sustainable 17 Goals. I hope if you don't know about those, these are critically important. It's the one thing that all 193 countries in the UN signed. The second thing that we use is from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's the Coordinated School Health Model that has 10 components that, as you can see, the kid in the middle, that a safe, engaged, supportive, challenged, and healthy kid. And we create that by these 10 different components. But you can see wrapped around it always is community. That community umbrella is always important to have any success in developing children. And the final model that we engage in is the social and emotional health, the Cassell model. You could see that really the 5 principles there are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and societal or social awareness. And again, from classrooms to schools to family, and that outer ring is community. And what that community means is that we all have an opportunity to be engaged, to help, to contribute to that social and emotional learning experience for a child. So I'm going to talk real quick about how our platform works. One of the things, as I said, is Min Kai and I have been to 500 communities, and we realized that no two communities were alike. So in essence, whatever program or model we were going to use, we knew that that had to be adapted to that community. That one shoe didn't fit every community. So we developed a user-based profile, which what we call skins. And that allowed us to create thousands of unique profiles that allow an organization or a school in Russia to have access to certain material that was uniquely different than in South Africa, but at the same time when we felt it was relevant for them to share that principle. And so here's a quick example how you might see an album in Turkey. Again, we have all these partnerships with the university. So in Turkey, they developed content that was unique to their culture. Dances, music, sport movement, everything in their language that they thought was appropriate for their schools. In China, they did the same thing. They created content that was unique to their community, from music to dance to martial arts. But what was unique about our platform, not only did they have access to their content, they had access to content from all over the world. And so we collaborated with 54 countries on creating content in dance, music, art, anything that we felt that from a perspective of movement and art, we could then develop a better kid. And of course, these are just some of the many partnerships that we have. We work with training tools in terms of a lot of focus on balance. We know that when we engage balance and crossing the midline, that means taking your appendages, your left or your right side, and crossing the middle of your body through creative writing or playing an instrument or throwing or swinging a bat. We know that that engages the left and the right side of the brain. So we spend a lot of time looking at tools that can focus on balance or engaging crossing the midline. And here's a quick video.
Georgia is using a program called HOPSports, and they're beaming in videos of famous athletes into gym classes so kids can learn skills and techniques from their heroes and their role models.
So a lot of things that we do is also create resources and standards. And that's what we're currently working on, is converting all of our standards in the native language. It's a big task for us because there are 193 countries we're working on right now. And of course, in every country, there are multiple languages or dialects. So this will be an overwhelming project for us for the next couple of years. So this is just a little bit of how we break it down and kind of how we work with sport organizations. We've been very blessed to take some leadership with the NBA, the National Basketball Association here, Major League Baseball, and the National Football League, and work with their campaign. So I'm just going to show an example of how we work with the NFL Foundation, who really has 4 commitments. Their salute to servicemen and working with soldiers that have PTSD. Their Play 60 movement, which is dedicated to the well-being of children. Stop Domestic Violence is their 3rd one, and also their contributions to funding research in cancer, especially women with breast cancer, which is the pink ribbons on your bottom right. They've donated over $350 million to these programs. So it's important that, again, how as an individual, how can many of you collaborate with organizations like this to help integrate your program into their mission? And again, how we break it down, in the NFL, there are 32 teams. So when they came to us, they needed 32 different programs for 32 different cities, which means that when we were working in Atlanta, we had to provide different resources than we did in Detroit. Again, which made our platform, and I spend a lot of time in this area, is how can we develop platforms that operate on a global level, but respect the individual community and culture. So again, because we can set up those user-based platforms, it allows us to put content for Detroit, that's different than content than Atlanta. And more importantly, it allows us to work with those organizations that are already there. To where we're providing resources. So if we're looking at working with an organization and they're looking at drought conditions or the impact that dirty water is having on the health of children, we're able to collaborate and say, look, why are we providing Atlanta resources to South Africa? So again, as you're developing your platforms, make sure that the content is relevant to the community that you're in. And, just an example of how these collaborations can not only work with the team, but the corporations. So one of the SDGs, and there's 169 targets, one of them is to reduce road injuries and deaths around the world. Well, most organizations had a relationship with the car industry. So it allowed us to partner up with the Ford family in Detroit, or it allowed us to partner up with Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, and not only provide a little bit of mission on their part in branding, but allowed us to actually tackle to high schools one of the SDGs. And just from a gaming perspective, we like to use and create a lot of games, not only us, but we allow the kids to create the games. We give them the assets and they develop all the games for us. And gaming is an important factor for us because it allows us to really measure some unique things in terms of behavior, decision-making, all of these things that help us develop better programs for kids down the road. And of course, with these, we can bring in other brands, we can switch. So just the last thing, I want to just talk about a couple things. We're always working with all-inclusive kids. So it's critical in our partnership with UNESCO that we develop programs and we engage and incorporate kids. These were kids with special needs that actually helped us develop the content related to golf. Unfortunately, the young gentleman on the left died 1 year, but this was a great joy for him to kind of spread his message. I just want to go over a couple little relationships that we have from organizations that we work with in terms of looking at programs from how socks can play a critical role in teaching racism, bullying, all-inclusive. You can add that CSR brand messaging. This was a program with the Sox in Place 60 that we realized kids didn't want to talk about it. So we made it You Make the Call, where kids could use hand signals if they were being inappropriately touched or domestic violence was happening in their house. Thanks to the music, one of our longest partnerships has been with Remo Drums and Yamaha Music that looked at music. We provide drum kits and programs to kids and countries all over the world come up with their own messaging to teach kids the power that music, especially drumming, has on mental health. We use the OrganWise guys to come up, and these are the organs in your body. One of the things we like about this is they have one of the best transitional programs that kids can take home. Of course, I already talked about ISPTC. This is one of the great ones. We're working with Disney right now called face-to-face communication, and we're using acting techniques to really teach kids through acting how they can engage and counter bullying, how they can look at in your face, no bragging, honesty, be conscious of their emotions and their behavior. And again, Kimochi's another little program that's done in several languages that engages kids in their feelings. We look at indexes, how the environment and air impacts you. So I'm going to wrap it up real quick with what our mission is for the foundation. We are putting and providing 10,000 schools with their own platform on brain breaks. Through the blockchain, we're developing the first, what we call S-Commerce, that will look at transparent fundraising on a blockchain and how we can actually fund these programs around the world. Because they're important, people will invest if they know where their dollar is going. They will invest in these programs. This is just part of the structure of the blockchain that we're working on, and how it individually, again, blockchains can be and S-commerces can be broken down to the school. And this is the final thing that we're looking at is what we call the My SDG Index, the GCH Index. We are putting together, when you look at social and emotional and a happiness index, when you look at a KPI scale, when you look at the environment you're in, when you look at what you're eating, we believe when you put all those components together, we can actually create a GCH index where what you do, how you do, and why you do it matters. And this is the thing I think our team is most excited about. I just want to thank everybody. I hope that was quick and to the point, and I can't emphasize enough. I hope everybody got that I am looking forward, that partnerships matter to us, and that throughout this week, I hope we can engage, because our primary goal is to bring best practices that you all are doing and how we can help you bring that to educational institutions, not only all over the world, but how you can tweak and customize that experience so that it matters in that community. Again, thank you everybody for listening. I hope I wasn't too quick. Sorry about a little bit of the sharing. As I said, I'm off the grid in Oregon, and I'm about 40 miles away from the nearest city. I don't even have a stoplight in my town.
Tom, you're great. How are you holding up? I know it's late and you're still recovering from COVID. And how are you holding up after speaking for nearly an hour? You're good?
Yeah, it's only 7:30 here. You know me.
Right. Oh, that's true. I'm forgetting it's West Coast time.
Yeah, it's 7:30 at night. So I'm doing fine, and I appreciate you always checking in on me, Teresa. And it's a slow recovery, but I'll get there. And I'm lucky that I've had a lifetime of health, and there's just so much community support and so many wonderful, kind individuals like you and everybody on this call and this Zoom, and especially you, Veronica. So again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody and how possibly we at the foundation can collaborate with you.